Today, I'm grateful to have Bob Turner, Director of the L.M. Graves Memorial Library at the Harding School of Theology, for a little interview. Bob is married to Andrea. They have two daughters, Julia and Catherine. Bob lives in Memphis, where he also preaches for the Church of Christ at White Station. And this is a short little interview, maybe an introduction to a special event coming up for us at Prestoncrest. And Bob will be with us in person at Prestoncrest to speak on the topic, Coddled or Challenged, the role of Bible classes in spiritual formation. And so, Bob, I want to welcome you to this interview, and glad that you could take the time to be with us to introduce what you're going to be sharing on October the 4th. And I thought to begin with, it might be good to just think about this word, coddling. It's important to the presentation, and to indulge or to not hold someone accountable. And so to explore this whole idea, I wanted to ask, just if I could, a few questions.
Yeah,
to begin with, Christianity has often been portrayed and thought of as something that we feel. But you want to talk also about how we think. Now, why is that so important right now, do you think?
Well, God gave us feelings for a reason, and we all feel. And the people who wrote the book that I'm looking at, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, Jonathan Haidt is a psychologist, and he knows exactly how to talk about feelings. But that's an incomplete kind of picture of how God has made us. I think about when Paul talks to a church and he says, people are going to be carried around, blown around by every wind of teaching. And that our ability to function as a church does rely on our ability to love God with our minds. And I don't think I need to make the case for this. I think any of you watching this can just go and log on to Facebook and get into a discussion where people are clearly being driven by their emotions and saying irrational things to try to win an argument based on their feelings. And we're not quite as good at listening and thinking.
Okay, all right. And so some of us will coddle that. We will indulge that. We'll allow that to go on. Well, you use this word coddling, and it might sound a little harsh to use it. What do you mean by coddling?
Yeah, so when Jonathan Haidt wrote this piece, he wrote the book, and they said, you should call this the coddling of the American mind. He said, I don't know, that sounds harsh. Coddling sounds judgmental. And that's a word, I think it sounds judgmental because that's a word we often use when we think about babies or those who are hurt. And I want to affirm that. I think that we all have moments of hurt and pain, and we don't need a judgmental person standing over us telling us, get up and dust yourself off. But we're not always in moments of hurt and pain. And I think it's important to remember that God, in part of our spiritual walk and our spiritual formation, Paul uses words like put on the armor of God. Well, what kind of person is going to put armor on? Well, it's a person who's going to go to battle. And if we live in if our faith journey is centered only on us, then I think coddling makes perfectly good sense because it makes us feel good. If our faith journey is centered in God and asking what exactly is best for the kingdom of God and for God's mission in the world, then it's going to require us to be sometimes words like strong, words like firm, grounded, anchored. And so in a world that I think, there's an inclination to want to be coddled. I mean, I think all of us sometimes want to come home, put on the sweatsuit and have the pint of ice cream. And that's awesome. There's a place for that. I think if a church culture does that every single time, we're going to find ourselves in a place where we're not quite as useful to God as we'd like to be. If our whole church culture is about doing immediately what makes us feel good, we're not going to be people who have an ability to sacrifice for one another, to be long-suffering for each other, to be patient with each other. People who can be generous and disciplined. Those are things that we need to develop as disciplines and character virtues. that we don't get by spiritually putting on the sweatpants and finding the Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, yeah. And something key you talked about is we do live in a culture that says it's all about me. It's all about me and whatever I can do to make my life easier and better, and any shortcuts I can find, that's where I'm going to go, and don't require anything of me. And so when I bring a Christian into that environment, there's always this choice: is who is going to impact who here? Am I going to be shaped by my culture, or am I going to be shaped by my God? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and all that. Those are decisions that are made, and that takes work, it takes energy, it takes determination. Well, you've mentioned this book. It's the coddling of the Christian mind takes kind of a takeoff of coddling of the American mind. I'd like to hear more about the implications you think that has for the church. You talked a little bit about it, but
Yeah.
hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I read this book, Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff. They write this book about how they worry that it's just based on some data. It's that a lot of our Generation Z, people born since 1995, are more clinically depressed than ever. They are being admitted to hospitals with cutting injuries, self-inflicted, at higher rates than ever. And we're in an incredible time of crisis for that. And so that's kind of a current factual problem we're dealing with. And he's just asking, how exactly did we get here? And if you look at some of the populations who are struggling the most, it's those who are coming from what we would call the most comfortable backgrounds. It's people who are coming from wealth. It's people who are coming from supportive families, but maybe too supportive. And he just asked the question of, is it possible, in his words, have we set up a generation for failure, that we have given them so much that we've actually hurt them? So I'm reading this book. I'm a dad. I'm thinking about this. I preach. And I said, there is an enormous temptation for us in church to do this kind of thing, where in order to almost seduce people into a faith walk with Jesus, or to make the church look attractive, or to make it feel comfortable to people who have been around a long time, or to try to avoid conflict, to give the illusion of congregational happiness, that sometimes we may end up, I would say, compromising Jesus's radical call to discipleship, and instead practice a spirituality that just feels a little bit like sweatpants and the pint of ice cream. And so as I read that book, I said, this has so many implications. I think about one guy recently. I don't know if you know about these Spartan races. It's these, a 10K run where you'll do some of it through the mud and climb. Right. The guy who runs those, he was a Wall Street trader, and he eventually decided that wasn't for him. He had a lot of money, but it wasn't satisfying. He moves up to one of the New England states, I think New Hampshire, gets a farm. And he wants to think about how to just toughen up people, how to build some toughness, not just so that you go through some difficult thing, but how do you develop trust in yourself? How do you develop the belief that you have character that can persevere? Mm-hmm. He invites students up. So he'll have these parents want to toughen their kid up. They send him up to his camp for 2 weeks. And he'll have these kids who come from a background where they have enough money that their parents can send their kids to camp for 2 weeks. And he'll have them do tasks like, digging holes and carrying rocks and buckets of water and all of these tasks, eating apples for a day as your diet and things like this, standing in cold water. And it's nothing torturous. It's hard. Right. It's just labor. I think probably people born in 100 years ago in America called it farming,
Yeah, life.
That's right. And on day 3, there are kids writing letters to their parents, and they're saying, I am miserable. This man is crazy, and you are the worst parents ever. Come rescue me. And then by day 14, the last day, they're writing letters back to the director of the camp, and they have tears in their eyes. And they're saying, I found somebody inside of me that I didn't know existed.
Wow.
And it was because you required me to find that.
Hmm.
And I just wonder in churches and as we think about our spiritual lives, is there somebody that God is working on inside of us that looks
Hmm.
more like Jesus than I do right now?
Hmm. Yeah.
But it's only through that discipline that God is going to be able to bring that person out.
Wow. Well, you've segued right into another question I wanted to ask you, because much of the ministry of a church is aimed at God's work in the spiritual lives of its members. And so I'm a spiritual formation minister. How does coddling impact God's formation of our spirits?
It plays defense against it, right? I mean, God is trying to work on us. Sometimes it's through hardship, sometimes it's through being uncomfortable. That certainly seems to be in the ministry of Jesus. His discipleship with his disciples is, I am going to make you uncomfortable in how we're going to do ministry together. Every time we run away from that, we're losing an opportunity for God to reveal something in us. So
Yeah.
that's the spiritual formation piece.
Yeah. And everything we encounter, if I'm looking for God in it, I can miss it every time. But if I look for him and I ask, okay, how is God working in this today? How is God working in this situation, or in what that person said to me today? I think we can find it. I think we can. Well,
we focus. So, we focus so much on kind of the people relationship, right? How is this person
Right.
hurting me? How do I feel hurt? How is this person wrong? How am I right? And you're asking a much deeper question, I think, which is, where is God in this, and what can God do through this? Which I think is a incredibly countercultural set of questions.
Yeah. Well, it always has been. Peter asked that question: how many times do I have to forgive somebody? It's all about Peter. Jesus says, no, it's not. It's all about God. It's not how many times. It's just you keep doing it. Well,
I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. When we get through with this, your time here, we're going to kind of launch into our kind of after study. But what do you hope to leave us with? What do we want to take away from this study, do you think?
Yeah, two things. I would hope that our Bible classes would continue to be rich places where we're challenged. I know sometimes in classes and in context of Bible study, it's easy to say, let's just kind of go around and share. And there's a place for that. I just hope it's not the entire place. I think that if the Bible does one thing for us, it teaches us that we don't always know. We don't have the answers. We don't always know the right questions. And Bible study is this humbling process where, by opening the Bible, by simply opening it, we're confronted with our own limitations. And I just think that's a powerful thing that our Bible study structure and our Bible classes can let us do. So I think I would hope that we can maintain a tradition that I think you all have at Prestoncrest of a really vigorous Bible class program. In terms of takeaways on an individual level, I do think that this is just a primary way that God's going to work through us, is to think that when we call ourselves Christian, we are calling on the name of a man who hung on a cross.
Yeah.
And like the most obedient son ever, with the greatest dad ever, and was not coddled at all. And if we're going to call on that name of Christ, I just don't think that the easy way or the simple way or the shortcuts are going to work for us. And I think, and also the blaming and the trying to make everything a right wrong, or trying to make ourselves a victim, that's not going to work either. That there's a larger question that Jesus would ask is, what's the Father up to here?
Yeah. Well, good. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to do this interview. And I really am looking forward to the time in October. And I just pray you'll stay healthy and your travel here will be safe. Are you driving?
I'm driving. I'm really looking forward to being with everybody. I think it's going to be a great weekend. I hope everyone can come.
Yeah, it's a nice drive. I just did it. So It's
Yeah.
a good way to think. So well, be careful and be safe, and we look forward to having you here.
Thank you so much.
All righty.